watching the Hub Network. The Studio Show. People, community, progress. Here is your host, Joe Kennedy.
I think the first thing that people would recognize about the transition leadership has been the fact that we have taken a very bold step in getting out in the community and focusing on having town hall meetings that we've tabbed the Cushing Conversations. I've been in partnership with Vice Chairman Don Amon to begin to make those things happen. And the fruit from that is going to be that we hope and believe that other commissioners will also want to get themselves plugged into it. So it creates another tangible aspect of the Cushing City Commission that we're approachable, that we're touchable, and that we can be reached.
And I am Joe Kennedy, and I'm here again with Terry Brandon, the second time around. Second time's a charm, right? Hopefully we don't have to do this a third time. He's like, please let me be done after this. I'm sure is what he's saying. But we're so glad that Terry could come back today and be with us today. And we apologize for the audio issue we had last time. It happens on occasion, so we've got that corrected, though. So that was, I think talked about this before. It was about 2015 when you made that statement. And you were chairman of the board at that time on the commission. And what we didn't know was your pursuit towards the city manager's job, which you would eventually fill that job. And I'm just going to say you've been doing a great job. And that focus that you had during that quote with information getting out to the public has been not only executed by you very well, but there's just so much information now. We get more information now than we've ever gotten from anybody in your position in my time around here, for sure. And yesterday was a good example of that because your city manager's report came out for March, and people can look at that. It's on the Studio Show Facebook page, and just the plethora of information that is there on all the projects going on. And that's been a high priority for you, has it not, Terry? Welcome again. Welcome the second time. I want to get right into it.
I'm glad to be here. I have very fond memories of the studio. Like I said last time, I was the only guy that chose against Cushing football, and that cost me a whole lot of pizza, Joe. But we won't go back there, okay? But it's good to be here this morning. I appreciate you having us here. But you're absolutely right. You know, we have taken a very proactive approach to sharing information with our community. You know, we do that on a monthly basis. There's been no city manager before me that chose to be intentional about the execution and distribution of information.
Absolutely.
But I knew from different perspectives that was something that needed to be done. And I appreciate looking back on those days on the city commission. I appreciate the perspective of Don Amon and having the courage to get out in the community with me. And we appreciated Steve Spears getting out in the community with us as well. I think at first, I don't want to completely speak for him, but I think at first it was a little bit bothersome, if you will, because no one had ever done that really.
Right.
But once he came and experienced the fact that we were getting positive input and positive results from that, I think he felt a lot better about it being a good thing for the town.
Well, it was an avenue to get, like you said, it kind of made you guys vulnerable. It made you accountable to the city. People could ask you guys questions directly. And it probably cleared up a lot of things that people assume, which still happens today. People still assume that things are going a certain way, but they're talking directly to you guys. And that's a very beneficial relationship, I would say.
It is. And sometimes, depending on the issue, it can be a very difficult relationship. You know, the one thing that I always believe is that we can agree to disagree, but it doesn't have to make us disagreeable. We're all neighbors in this community.
Right.
You know, we'll see each other at Walmart. We'll see each other at the movie theater downtown. We'll see each other at the Mexican restaurant downtown. We'll see each other at the Steer Inn and Brahms and places like that. But it can be difficult sometimes when you get out and make yourself vulnerable like that. But I think when you work to lead with integrity, I think when you're an elected official, especially when you work to lead with integrity and your heart for service is right, I think people will embrace that and they will give you that grace that you may need from time to time to deal with an issue.
Absolutely. And let's talk about that just a little bit because you talk about taking on the city manager's position here. You've talked about that. And that wasn't something that maybe some people would say, gosh, is he qualified to be the city manager? And I would say, you have, over the last 6 years, 5 or 6 years, you have demonstrated the fact that you have a handle on every issue that's going on. I know you personally. I know exactly what you do, and you study everything in depth, and you know all the little details about this stuff. And if you don't know something, somebody asks you a question you don't know, you find out the answer and you get it back to them. So you know in depth what these issues are and what to do to move Cushing forward. You have been working on that very hard, I think, in the last 6 years.
And I appreciate that. One thing I always want to remind people that we have extremely smart people who work at the city. I'm surrounded by an excellent executive team, from legal to finance to human resources to public safety. And then I'm surrounded by an excellent external leadership team out in public works, and then out at some of our quality of life facilities like the youth center, the senior citizen center, library. So we have great leadership in all those different areas. And so it makes my job a lot easier. You said something a while ago when you introduced, was that, when you were in pursuit of that city manager's job. I actually wasn't in pursuit of it.
Okay.
I was a part of the commission who was seeking to find the next replacement, and it was funny to me that the tables kind of turned inward to say maybe we ought to consider you for that opportunity. And it wasn't something I really embraced at first. I wasn't really for that. I had an excellent job working here locally. I work for a wonderful owner who's a good man publicly. He's also a good man privately. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't really interested in that. And then the more that we considered the different applicants that were coming in, it started to kind of shape up and make sense. The biggest challenge I think for me going into it was, I did have people question my ability to do the job, my ability to do it effectively, and my ability to lead effectively. And, what has been my experience in running a city. I look back and I asked the same question about the police department. What made me qualified to run it? I have a college degree, but it's not in running a city. But we led effectively well in the police department here. We left it better than once we got it. And I think if I went back to my office today and turned the lights out and called my wife and said, hey, I think another season has come along, I can look every person in the eye in Cushing and tell them with clarity that I've left this organization and the town better than once I got it. And that's what every season of leadership is supposed to do. The person who follows me should do the same thing. And it's no indictment of the previous leader. It's just the fact.
Well, I think that is an important thing to talk about, because going into that position, and I did use the word pursue, and I don't know that was correct. Obviously, you've corrected that, but I would say there were some that were hoping for that. I personally was, because at that point in time, we kind of had a vacuum there a little bit of true leadership in the sense of projecting a vision out for Cushing, moving Cushing forward on a specific course of success, and that was no more evident than maybe in the Main Street project. We can talk about that a little bit too. There's a lot of things I want to talk about here, and I don't know if we can get them all in again today, but roads were a big issue. They're still a big issue, but
yes, they are.
But I want to point out that you were on a very specific path, though, to correct some of that stuff. And the wheel of government turns very slowly. It's hard to get all that stuff moving. And so how did you kind of, knowing that all those projects were just hanging out there that had to be addressed, that can't have been kicked down the road so far that you had to take that on, and they're not very sexy issues. They're not things that people like to talk about and go, wow, that's a great thing. I mean, we'd kind of dealt with the skate park, I guess, before, and a little bit the water park, and those were kind of fun things to kind of deal with, I guess. But infrastructure issues, you've had to take on a pile of infrastructure issues as you moved down the road here. What's that been like as far as?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I kind of liken it to the alpine climber in the Price is Right game. We've continued to do this. We were here, and we've continued to just climb on a daily basis. One of the first things that I did was establish public works meetings, so I could have a clear understanding of what public works did exactly, who ran our public works divisions, and then what things needed to be done that we knew nothing about. And when I say we, I'm talking about the leadership knew nothing about, or if they did know about it, it wasn't addressed. And so there was a lot of valleys to climb out of, if you will. And so those first, I'm going to say the first several months, first couple of years of being in this position, there was a lot of valley walking. There really was, because there was so much to do, and some days it was really overwhelming when I sat back and probably thought about what needed to be done. Since then, we've taken some bold steps to invest a lot of resources in upgrading sanitary sewer and water infrastructure. We're making improvements at our plant to better operations at our water production plant, and at our sewer production plant. It's been no secret we've had some significant challenges at the power plant. We're working to get operations that are wholly restored. We're not there yet, but we've got purchase orders issued to repair at least 2 engines. We have one other engine that's currently out on bid. We're looking at replacing some cooling towers down there on the north side that are, Joe, they're crumbling in. And it's embarrassing. It really is. And those are not things that started 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, so we're steady trying to make it, trying to make the town better, more resilient. And, you look at the highway project as an example. When we came into office, the highway project was on life support. Oklahoma Department of Transportation, once I got there, started asking me a lot of questions about a lot of different things. And so I started meeting with some of the executive staff to try to figure out what was going on. And you don't have better historical references and points of support than you do, that I had at that time, in Debbie Farley and Brenda Butcher. And Brenda's she's my primary assistant. I have now a secondary assistant in Melissa Gahn. Both of them are excellent. Melissa manages the engineering and project side, and then Brenda manages our office.
Right.
But, that project was on life support. And once we realized that the city had not done the things it was supposed to do, I asked for a meeting in Guthrie with the leadership from ODOT to talk to them about staying on the 8-year plan. We were going to get removed from the 8-year plan, which meant that this project that's going on today, which is nearly a $20 million project, was not going to happen for the town. And so when I went to Guthrie, I took another staff member with me because I wanted them to hear what was being said, so there was no misunderstanding about what was communicated from me and them. So there'd be 2 versions of the story if the council wanted to inquire, that if I could step out of the room and you could ask this other person whatever you want to ask them related to that meeting. And I just told them, we as a community and our leadership, we have completely failed and we've let you down. But I said, if you will give me 60 days to get the money put together, get a plan put together, I'll get this thing rolling. I'll hire the appropriate right-of-way consultants and easement consultants, and we will get this going. We'd already hired an engineering firm several years ago who had done some preliminary work for us, but it just kind of died off.
Well, and none of the easements had even been approached to be purchased. I mean, it wasn't just dead in the water. I mean, there was no movement on it at all. Yeah.
No. So the only work that had been done was out of Maine and Linwood, because there was some right-of-way and utility work out there. And so I went, and I remember calling Dr. Don Amon, who was our chairman at the time, and I said, man, we have a major issue. And I just told him, I said, we cannot allow this highway project to fall apart on us. Man, I need $2 million. And that city council at that time did not blink an eye. I know it made Chairman Griffith, our chairman now, nervous, because he watches.
He's a numbers cruncher.
Yes,
yeah.
he is. He's a banker by trade.
Yeah,
so, yeah. But all the commissioners were wholly on board with that, and so they got me the money in place, and I went out and hired the right consultants. I consulted with other people to find out who the best in the business were, got those people on board, hired another engineering firm to come in and pick up work for us, and guess what?
Got it moving.
The project is underway.
Well, and that in itself takes, I mean, that stuff doesn't happen quickly. I mean, there's a lot of process to go through. I mean, just hire an engineering firm to come in and start assessing what's going on. And easements and buying, right-of-ways and all that kind of stuff. Those are all difficult things that take a lot of time. And so really you've been on a fast track as far as getting that moving. We're seeing the results of that now.
Yeah, and the beauty of the right-of-way and easement project for Cushing is that, Joe, you would be amazed at the business owners that we had that actually donated easement and right-of-way. You would be amazed at that. Wow. I remember a specific conversation that I had with Joe Nafee. Joe Nafee is someone who has incredible and impeccable character in this community. Is already missed. in this community. But I remember having a conversation with him about some changes that need to be made around his property that would better serve his business. And so, through some just basic negotiations up and down Main Street, we had a lot of buy-in from the Main Street owners because it's transformative.
Absolutely.
When it's all done, it's going to be
Well,
transformative.
I mean, the result of that will be incredible for economic development up and down Main Street.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about downtown in the past and everything that's seen here. We've had focus on that. Things have started to move there. That was one problem that I think was on the plate even when you were coming in. That was a hot topic back then. Main Street was a hot topic. I mean, we couldn't get, for Cushing to develop at all, we had to have better access in Main Street and better road there and a better way for people to where they wanted to build and where they wanted to do that kind of thing. So that problem, that's a huge, big problem that was almost taken off the table altogether. And so you revised that and got that going. And I think we're already seeing, I mean, you can just see as the road gets put in there, other things that are happening on Main Street now, which is a pretty big deal.
We're really proud of that work, though. Our
Absolutely.
staff did an excellent job of getting all that together. And
Very-
our consultants.
Very fast. I remember noticing.
record time.
Yeah, I remember noticing that you guys were out there talking about utility, reworking all the utility on those intersections early on. I mean, that plan really wasn't that long ago. It's been a couple of years ago. I mean, it's been, but not. That's not a very long time. Talking about what we're doing here as far as moving all those utilities. We had issues with traffic lights and all that kind of stuff. We've had stuff. The Harmony Road issue was a big issue back then too, when Dr. Amon was on the commission. So all of that stuff moving forward. The drainage issue just on Main Street was horrible because that used to, you'd drive down Main and about halfway down you'd be driving through a lake almost some days if it rained too hard. So all that stuff has been taken on. That's been a big project just by itself. But that's not been your only focus the whole time you've been working on this stuff. I remember going down there a couple of years ago and you had a whole board full of projects that were ongoing, and these were all things that we're still playing catch up on, even from the previous administration. And I don't mind telling you, it's a lot of what the talk was back then that were a little bit discouraging for citizens in Cushing, because why is none of this stuff moving? Why, I mean, that question was asked a lot of the previous administration. And when I came down and would ask some of those same questions to you, you'd flip that board around and say, which project were we talking about? We'd go down to it, the boop right there, and down the list you would go with all the detail. And so I think...
But I think you should tell I think you should tell how frustrated you are when you came to see me, because you were not very happy. Because
No, probably not.
No, you weren't. And I think you had gotten really down on our leadership, because I think you had an impression that we had fallen back into that same rut. And I remember taking you into the courtroom.
That's correct.
And I turned that board around. I said, here's all the things that we're pre-planning on and doing. And you were in shock.
I wasn't shocked because...
You were in shock.
it was kind of like, and I have to apologize as a citizen, because at one point in time I was very plugged in with what was going on, and with health issues, I kind of got removed from that. Then I got plugged in again. Then I got removed from that. So hopefully that that doesn't continue to happen in that pattern. But I'll say that, yeah, I was just like, are we not moving forward on this stuff? And because it was of such huge importance, even years ago, we've been talking about this for 10 years, or whatever. But when you flipped that board around and showed all these projects that were moving forward and how they were moving forward and what state they were in, it wasn't just that, you literally were going day to day on all these projects, touching each one of these things every day, it seemed like, and just to move them forward. What's the next step? What's the next little step? And again, that is your forte has been not only that management of those details and to move those projects along, but the dissemination of that information. Because what shocked me was that you flipped that board around, it was all right there, and it was pretty impressive actually to hear somebody with that information give me that answer on those things. Not that I'm anybody to say, but I'm just saying it was in full motion, every bit of it. And that was a long time ago. That was early on.
And it still is.
So that has been your approach. And like you said, you're on this trajectory of steadily climbing up, trying to fix some of these problems. you mentioned last time in your which didn't come through to everybody else, but you really haven't got to touch anything fun yet, something enjoyable for the city to kind of, something that you really want to see. But I guess the benefit for you is kind of starting to see some of these results of all that hard work the last several years.
I think the work that we're doing to help build community sustainability and resiliency in terms of our infrastructure has been probably one of the biggest priorities for me personally. We've de-invested so much in ourselves, but not investing in ourselves with the appropriate resources to keep our infrastructure at a healthy level. Now, not all of it is going to be like that.
Right.
And it can't be, because it would take millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to do it all at once. I'll give the example of going through and replacing water and sanitary sewer up on Main Street. So you have what they call participating items and non-participating items. Participating items are things that are covered by ODOT. So if they have a water line that's in conflict with where they were going to make a portion of the road improvement, they go in and replace it. Well, I came in and said, well, if you're going to replace that section, we're going to replace the whole section. And so
you're going to dig the hole and do it. They might as well do it now.
Yeah,
right?
so we've been doing that. Tulsa Civil is their contractor out of Tulsa, so they've been doing all that work. They're doing major work right now at Main and Harmony. So you're probably seeing these gigantic boxes. Well, they're replacing a 16-inch water line for us. And so that is the main feed line into the water plant. We're building a redundancy there. And why are we doing that? It's because if we lose that service, we lose the ability to get water out to people in a timely and efficient manner. And so we're building some redundancy, and if something happens there, we can switch over to another line and still get that water to the plant. That's a $150,000 project. But so far,
and that ODOT's covering that. I mean, those you're covering. So that's a
non-participating item.
Okay.
So far, as of several weeks ago, we've invested just over $1.4 million to $1.5 million back into our own community through infrastructure investments. And so we anticipate, we set aside about $1.4 million a couple of years ago in anticipation for this. And so we're not going to be too far behind when the bill comes. The project should be completed in the fall of this year. And then at some point after that, we'll get a bill from ODOT to pay those non-participating items. So we're looking at anywhere between $2 to $2.5 million to be our final investment. But it's been an investment worth making. And in other areas of town, just like this major sewer project that we have in development now up to the old Drake station, you're talking about replacing a sewer line that's probably 50 years old. We've already replaced 2 portions. We need to continue to take that up to the lift station up in Old Drake and get the lift station in Old Drake brought up. Everything is underground right now. And I have if you go to my web, or not mine, but if you go to the city's Facebook page, I think you also have it on your Facebook page. If you go to the city manager report this month, there's a very detailed explanation in there about that project. We just finished up the staking in an area, so you'll see a lot of staking up through those properties. And now right-of-way and easement team is currently working now with the property owners to start obtaining the right-of-ways and easement. You would think that we would already have that, but a lot of stuff 40, 50 years ago was done on a handshake. And so we want to do the appropriate thing and have easements there so we can work on things if things break.
And that's a part of, you're talking about just the planning that goes into that, because you can't overlook this stuff, this non-participating items that go on and not have a plan already in place. I mean, you have to, those are things that have to be very well coordinated with ODOT and with you, and you have to have a plan, just like for the 2.5 million, there has to be a plan in place so that money is available and so that money's earmarked for those kind of things, and you're not sinking yourself or going into debt just because of, we overlooked that item. So it's a very meticulous, all that from power to sewer to just the improvements on the road, so that you're not spending twice that amount to go do it yourself 2 years from now.
Yeah, so thinking in terms of the money aspect of it, our finance team, there's 2 people that serve on our finance team. It's led by Jericho Worthy. A lot of people don't realize that Jericho's a CPA.
I didn't know that.
So to have a CPA running our financial divisions, that's a big win for this town. And then there's Darla Huckabee, who also works in office, so she manages our external assets, if you will, in terms of investments and things like that. There's a heavy reliance on working directly with finance to make sure that we're tracking well out of our office, and that we're working directly with her to make sure that we're not extending ourselves too
Beyond
much.
what- yeah, exactly.
Beyond our capabilities, and so because ultimately we have to be accountable, and that accountability comes back to me. And so we've done a fantastic job of doing a lot of tracking, just like our substation project right now. That's a $12 million project, but we think it's going to come in at about $10 million. But I'm telling you, that project is being tracked closely to make sure we stay within budget. We don't do things we're not supposed to, and so it's monitored very heavily.
Well, those, I mean, even just what you just talked about right there, moving through some of that stuff. I mean, the little details of that were not even dealt with years ago. I mean, what you just said in planning your finances forward. I mean, I want to talk about a lot of that. The budget is one thing. Jerica is another. She mentioned she occasionally, I guess, reports to the council. Maybe every month she does. I don't recall it now, but just on the amount of money that Cushing has within its assets, within the bank, and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of misinformation about that too, because people don't understand, one, how the city government works and how those funds are allocated, and they see this big total over here, $72 million or $80 million or whatever it is today. May be different than that now, but you can't just go. Doesn't matter what you want to do. You can't just go spend that money on whatever you want. It has to be for very specific things in a legal sense, because it's not, and I know you look at it this way, but as the city looks at it this way, it's not their money. This is the taxpayers' money. You have to be very accountable for every bit of that. So tell me how that works a little bit.
Yeah, so very true. So on a monthly basis, the finance division actually prepares a series of very detailed reports reporting our financial stability, reporting our investments and available cash. So in total, I was asked this at the Rotary Club here a few weeks ago, asked if we had some $80 million slush fund, and we don't. We have about $72 million in cash investments. A lot of those funds are highly restricted, meaning that just because I want to go do a project over here and a project over there, I can't just go take money out of the Hospital Trust Authority. There are specific things in the trust indenture that spell out what makes our ability to go and capture some of those funds available to us, right. What makes them available to us. And so every one of our trust indentures has specific things that says what we can and can't do. And so a lot of people, like you said just a while ago, can see that number and say, oh my gosh, you have $72 million. Why aren't we fixing roads and bridges and all this stuff? Well, you can't, because a lot of those funds are very restricted. And so we make a monthly accounting of those. I didn't mention this earlier, but I will. Monday night when we met, our finance director does a very in-depth analysis on our finances at mid-year. So we're tracking our financial situation from the beginning of the fiscal year through as the year goes. That's one set of monies that we're tracking. We're also tracking what we have over here in savings, what we have invested. Our financial policy, something we passed since I've been here in 2018. We have a financial policy that sets up how we govern our funds. A lot of people in the community don't realize this, but we have a threshold of 30 to 50% of revenue that we set aside yearly, if you will, to cover us in the event we have some catastrophic event happen. Go back to COVID. Mm-hmm. So when COVID happened in 2020, a lot of things just changed. How we interacted changed, but how we governed had to change for a short while. I remember that when I got that call that we had our first COVID case here, it was interesting to me. It was interesting to me that none of us really had a wherewithal about what to do. We'd never been faced with a pandemic like this. And so as time went along,
there's really no plan.
No, there was no plan for that type of pandemic. We had emergency response plans for pandemics, but that wasn't one of them. And so we, during that time, we stayed utility shutoffs. I remember going in and telling our utility team to restore service to everybody. So if they've been disconnected, we want services restored until we can get this thing figured out in terms of what's going to happen and how is this going to impact our community. Well, you had the school system who was in a state of flux. They were really kind of dealing with this on the fly, just kind of like everyone else was. And so we had a lot of kids at home. So, you know, the Lord challenges us to love our neighbor right where they're at and whatever the situation may be. And that was an act of loving our neighbor by restoring those utilities, not worrying about whether people could pay us or not. People were losing their jobs, people were getting laid off. There was a period of time we did not worry about people paying us. But you know what? We didn't have any problem with people paying us. And I think the reciprocal benefit of that is that the Lord has continued to bless this community in its financial stewardship, the resources that are available to us, and I also think in many parts through our leaders that have been appointed here.
Right.
You know, because it's my opinion that the Lord appoints the leaders,
Sure.
whether you like it or not,
Right.
through people.
Right.
And so I just think that's something that I look back on from a COVID perspective and what we did that I will always be grateful for. But going back to the threshold, we had coverage there to cover us during that time if things just really fell apart. So we have it in the city side,
Okay.
and we have it over in the CMA
Municipal,
side.
yeah.
So the city side is police, fire, library, senior citizen center, youth center, street department, parks department, and things like that. On this Cushing municipal side, which is really our business unit, that's where you have power distribution, that's where you have power production, that's where you have water and sanitary sewer, water production, sewer production, things like that, electricity sales,
Right.
water sales, trash, and those things. And so our business units were well covered. And so, but the community didn't fail us. And I don't think we failed the community either.
Well, that was a very vulnerable thing for the city to do because really you were opening yourself up for if everybody would have stopped paying their electric bill, whatever it is, the utility bill, it could have put a real crunch on the. I mean, it was a risk you were willing to take though to take care of the citizens here in Cushing, and so when you get through all of that and you look back and you see, well, really, it worked like it was supposed to, right? Because you did the right thing over here, and everybody else did the right thing on their side, so it all worked out. And that, I think, for a small town, says a lot about what Cushing is, who Cushing is, who the citizens are in Cushing. It wasn't nobody was trying to take advantage of the situation,
And they did.
and they did not. And so, but that's a pretty scary thing to do when you don't know what the results are going to be. Easy to say on this side of things, right? Hard to say on that side when you don't know what the result's going to be when you do something like that.
Well, I had a great comfort level in it because I knew that our heart for wanting to do that was right by the people. And I just have faith enough to believe that if we do right by the people, then we're going to always be in a good position. I just believe that. That my faith just tells me that, whether it's in my house or in the workplace. I just believe that. And we didn't have any letdowns. And even as the economy has continued to change over the last year, we have went overboard working with people to help maintain utilities and things like that. But I'm proud of what we did during COVID, particularly related to serving our citizens.
Well, and I think, there's so much that ties back to that. There was really a time in the city where we couldn't move much forward. I mean, there wasn't much you could do besides ride that out and get on the other side of it. Now that we're on the other side of it, things are, again, firing the way they should, a little bit more on the project side. Things are moving forward. And if you think about it, that really takes a 2-year chunk out of the momentum that you were trying to gain, in things going forward in Cushing. And issues that we're dealing with now, it seems like they're no-brainers, right? But they're really not, because all of this other stuff has to be in place before you can really think seriously about getting back on the housing issue, getting back on economic development, getting back on that stuff. And really, economic development has continued all through this time, too. That's another thing we have to talk about, because we've not been stagnant in that area. It just takes a long time to see the fruits and the benefits of that.
I don't think that we have. Matter of fact, I know that we haven't. We have been very aggressive in our pursuit of a grocery store. That hasn't fallen apart because of the city or the Cushing Economic Development Foundation. I'm confident in that. We've been very diligent in our pursuit of this refinery that's wanting to come to Cushing. If you follow our city council meetings here just a couple months ago, the city council authorized us to go out and hire bond counsel, and we did that. We applied for what they call private activity bonds that are maintained by the state of Oklahoma. We went after some of the money that was left over, if you will. So we ended up securing $75 million in private activity bond funding towards that project. Now, here's the great news about that. We had the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. Brent Kinsling was here last week with other members of Commerce, the Oklahoma City Partnership, Cushing Economic Development Foundation, City of Cushing, Chairman Mike Griffith. That has now been multiplied by 4.
The 75 million has been
75
multiplied.
million has been multiplied by
Okay.
4. So what we made a commitment to do related to the refinery project is that we're still committed to pursuing those private activity bond funds for the next couple of years. That is money that we have to dedicate aside from anything else that may be going on. You know, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar project. So this particular project for Cushing, I know for a fact, has risen all the way to Governor Stitt. And so he has been actively involved in wanting to know what we're doing with it, how we're doing with it, what do you need from the state of Oklahoma. And so I appreciate all the work that continues on that project. You know,
It's a big deal.
it is a big deal. You know, we worked on the Provalis deal. We haven't given up hope on Provalis. So we're hopeful at some point that they may want to consider coming to Cushing for sure. So we haven't shut the door on that project. There's some other projects that we have going on out in the industrial park that are pretty good projects that could bring some jobs to Cushing. So we're excited about that. That's continuing to be a work in progress through the Economic Development Foundation, and we're tied in there some too in the event that there's some need to help incentivize some of those projects. But yeah, economic development is slow, but we haven't just completely shut the door and just said, well, we're just not going to do economic development.
Well, that takes a long time. How many potential grocery stores have you looked at? I mean, there's been several I know that have thought they could come in here, but then because of the ownership of the property out there, they can't get anything going on. That's what I understand from Rick.
Three very firm prospects that have been here, that have been through the facility. We had one deal where there was a lot of money put up, earnest money put up, because they were serious about coming. That group walked away from the earnest money because they couldn't seem to work out anything with the actual property owners. And so that's been a real challenge for us because we don't own the property. It's been a real challenge for us to get that property owner, who is part of a firm out of New York. It's an equity firm out of New York. And so that facility is not cash flowing like it should. And so I would think that, or I should say we would think that they would want to work with us to try to get that facility cash flowing, which is a benefit to them. It's a tremendous benefit to our school system. And so all those things matter in the end, but we just can't seem to get them as interested as we are.
And that's what I'm gonna say. They don't view it quite the same way we do because they're an out of state. I understand from New York or somewhere like that. So they don't really see that as a community need. Although down here on this end is like we need that. We can use that facility out there. It's a big empty facility. They don't really see it as anything but a tax write-off, and they don't consider what the community needs are. Really, it's a bottom line thing. So they're looking at that very differently than what anybody in the community is looking at that.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. You know, someone may say, well, Terry, how does that benefit the school? Well, when you have property values that go up, that increases ad valorem.
Sure.
Well, that's how our school is funded. You know, and Cushing is a very blessed school district. You know, we're not on the state formula. So every little bit matters. And when every little bit matters, it impacts having great educators. It impacts creating great opportunities for students. And hopefully it brings people to our town because of our school and maybe other things.
Right. Well, and again, some of these issues, it's kind of a domino effect a little bit. If you solve one, it maybe helps solve 2 or 3 others down the road as well. You know, there's been a lot of talk, even through our candidate forum and other things, about annexation and what the benefits of that would be. But really, that sounds to me like, if we're talking from a city budget standpoint and services and all that kind of stuff, it's a huge expense to talk about annexation and bringing in other areas so that more people are on, buying our utilities and all that kind of stuff, all those services, bringing people into the community so they're spending money here in Cushing, and the sales tax revenue actually helps fund what the city's doing. But that's a very tricky thing to balance as far as annexation. And my understanding is we're kind of landlocked, are we not, with some of the tank farms? And I mean, that's a more difficult, complicated problem than just going and getting this piece of property and bringing it into the city limits.
It is, and I think that's a great question in terms of, are we landlocked? The answer to that question is absolutely we are. If you look at our town borders and you look at the infrastructure, particularly that's been built out south of town in terms of the tanks and things like that, we made a big mistake by not encompassing those territories, if you will, especially from a utility perspective. We provide public safety services out there to them, police and fire. Those entities out there are super, super supportive of us, but it would be great to have them inside the city limits, if you will. Annexation sounds good, but it's extremely difficult. We just can't go out and just randomly annex in property, a large swath of property, because the state law, not the city charter, but the state law doesn't allow us to do that anymore. I'll give you an example. The city of Oklahoma City, if you take the turnpike to Oklahoma City, when you get to about Luther, you'll see a City of Oklahoma City city limit sign on the turnpike. There's a mini fire station, a baby fire station out there as you exit to go to Jones. That's 30 miles from Oklahoma City. And so you had all this strip annexation, if you will, going on back when it was really easy to do. The state legislature has tightened that up so much that that's not a doable deal. And so you would have to have everyone consent to wanting to be annexed into the city limits. As an example, we had a prospect that was looking at a property a mile outside of Cushing, and they wanted to be in the city limits because they wanted to have police and fire and those types of things, water, sewer, and those types of things. So we looked at annexation for that particular property. We brought in land attorneys from GRDA to help us with that process. Wasn't going to be doable. And so annexation and going out and collecting swaths of property sounds really good, but the legislature said it doesn't work that way today. So unless you're contingent to the city limits, meaning that the city limits is right here,
Touching you,
and you're right here, then that makes that a possibility. But no, it's not as easy as it sounds.
So the bottom line to that is, again, that's kind of a result of things that weren't planned for back in the past, that we weren't, and so that's going to severely hinder us moving forward in that area, because not to mention the expense of doing that, but just the feasibility of it, the legal side of that is not going to be possible. So again, it sounds like a reasonable thing to say. If we could bring more people into the city, we bring more revenue into the city, we build the city, we do all that, but it's just not something that's legally possible at this point, is what you're saying.
It's not legally possible at the moment, not based on, and it all depends on the circumstance. But just like the example I gave you, that was a real circumstance for us. But stop and think about this: people who live on our borders now, who don't quote live in the city limits, they still spend here, they still shop here.
Very true.
And those aren't issues. Some of them have city services. Some of them receive water, some of them receive electricity. And so I don't think you have to live in the city limits to spend money in the city limits, and we found that to be true.
Well, and that's really the case, and I've known that about Cushing for a long time. I mean, there are little pockets of places just outside of Cushing, Dripping Springs and other places that still obviously all eat and shop and do all the stuff here in Cushing. They're that close, but it's just kind of the nature of the way. Cushing's always been positioned in a kind of a strange place. Back in the day when phone service was hard, we were right on the line, and it was long distance to Drumright, right? There were complaints about that all those years ago. But all those kind of things, Cushing's been kind of a strange place. And then now the tank farms, which are a huge benefit to having here in Cushing, obviously to the school system and to a lot of other things. have now kind of got us boxed in a little bit. But that was a project that was worked on for years and years and years too, and answered a different kind of revenue for the area than what the refineries were. The refineries were jobs and all that kind of going on, and those went away, and it was a real rough time for Cushing back in those days. So a lot has happened in the past, and a lot has, since you've been able to take the reins of this a little bit, you've had to get what was probably at a complete standstill turning again. And I think it says a lot to say, if you read that last city manager's report that came out, that wheel is moving about as fast as you can turn it, I would say, in my opinion.
And I don't disagree with that. And we're even trying to do things, as an example, the State Highway 18 project improvement. That's, I think, a 2026 project. We've already went up and already relocated the infrastructure that they said needed to be done. So I wanted to prove to ODOT that we were going to have no issues that we had before. And so we jumped out and did that almost 4, now maybe 5 years ahead of time. And so when they're ready to start that project, we've done the first leg of what we were supposed to do. So what have we done since then? So right now that project is in what they call 60% plan review. And so we took our city engineer, which is a firm out of Tulsa, and we have directed them to participate in all the ODOT preparation meetings and plan meetings. I'll take it a step further. We've also involved our own water, sanitary sewer, and electric and street leaders that serve. They're also involved in that process. So we have great representation at the table to help move us forward. And so we're currently working on now the conflicting infrastructure up and down Highway 18, because when it gets transformed, it's going to be really, really nice. But I will assure you, as long as I'm here, that we will not be behind the 8 ball. And if I left tomorrow, whomever comes in behind me, all those things are in motion, so all they have to do is pick them up and just make sure they keep going.
Completely different situation than I just want to point out, because you're right when you said before, I was frustrated, before you came to the city manager's position, absolutely, because there was just no, it was a bunch of stonewalled answers about, what are we doing here? Why do we not have anything going on Main Street? Why do we not have anything going, on the electric plant? Why are we not doing all this stuff? And there were just really no good answers. And now we can see a plan in place. And I think that's one of the most important things. I think everything that you've done is not only get all this stuff moving, which is a big task, but to disseminate the information and let people know. And there's almost so much information, it's kind of like an information dump, Terry. It's like, you want information? I'm going to give you 40,000 pages of information over here now. But I mean,
that is the downside.
That is a downside.
Yeah.
But at least we have the chance to look at that. Yeah. You put that out in a public way, which I know we appreciate. You can read all of that. Whether you agree or disagree with all of it, what you have to say, though, is that this is moving forward. And it will be very easy for the next person. Kind of brings me to another subject here a little bit, because, we all understand your personal situation here a little bit. And I just have to say personally that I have a large deal of respect for you and continuing to do the job at the level you're doing it every day. What time did you come into work today?
6:30.
6:30 in the morning. And you came here again, which, because of our own stupidity, we appreciate that. But you're very faithful to do all those things and to get information out. I know that you demonstrated that it's important to you, but you've already been to other meetings this morning before you even came here. So what do you see for Terry Brandon going forward? How do you want to continue to turn this wheel? How do you want to see things progress in Cushing while you're still here?
Well, I think the next big thing that we have coming up, and we're already working on the branding part of it, is our comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance update. And so you're talking about taking 2 plans that are over 40 years old and working hand in hand with the citizenry to update those plans. The comprehensive plan for me, and I just define it this way, it is the DNA of this community woven in together to create a great plan that helps advance the community. So you start looking at zoning ordinances for land uses and looking at mixed use development and things like that. If you look at what we have today, I'll give you an example. Main Street, you would think, would be really open to all sorts of commercial activity. Well, in fact, it's not. We had an auction house that was trying to go in up on Main Street, And I always tell people, and our city attorney will back this up, we try to liberally interpret those zoning ordinances because they are so old. So we try to find the max benefit for whomever's in asking the question. If we can, we will. If we can't, we'll just have to tell you we can. But the auction house fits into a C5. The area they would want to go into was a C3.
And that's down here is a C5.
C5's down here. And so I had to tell them it doesn't fit the zoning ordinance. And there was no interpretation that we could find that would allow us to just liberally interpret that and then be able to articulate why we granted that permission or occupancy, if you will, of that property. Now, there could be processes that someone could go through, appealing to the planning commission,
Right.
to change the zoning in a particular spot, if you will. They haven't been very favorable to spot zone things, but they are very favorable to helping people advance the community. So I told the individual who was trying to do the auction house, those are some options that you have, but we're not being anti-business at all. It's just that's the reality of it. I don't set the rules. I just have to follow them.
Right.
You know, and sometimes that particular reality could really upsets people, and people think, oh, you're not a very business friendly community and things like that. You know, I have friends that are in economic development across in other cities, friends that are city managers, and you hear that through all different kinds of communities. Oh, you guys aren't very business friendly. Well, I can tell you that I think that we work overtime to do as much as we can to help businesses get established here, help businesses expand if they desire to do that. So there may be some that disagree with that, but I will challenge you. We've had more good than we've had bad. I'll say that.
Well, what's the process of, speaking of that, if you were going to change that, if you were going to try to change the structure of how that all works, and if you were going to change the rules or change the charter, what's that kind of process like? I'm sure that's a long process.
Well, the charter requires of other people. You know, I don't set the charter. As an example, you know, Commissioner Denny stepped down the other night.
Yeah, right.
Most know that she's been chosen by the people to be the new Payne County Treasurer.
Right.
And so state law doesn't allow someone to hold two offices. It's prohibited. And so she stepped down. Our charter says that that position must be filled by someone qualified, 25 years of age, been a resident of Cushing for at least 1 year, not in any type of legal activity with the city or behind in taxes and things like that with the city. I don't know what that would be other than maybe sales tax or hotel motel tax. And then it says that the commission has up to 60 days to fill that position. It could be 5 days to fill it, or it could be up to 60 days to fill it. Those are things that are all set by the charter. Those are the rules that have been adopted by the people many years ago. And so those are the rules that are followed, but the charter has to be changed by the people.
And that's really a vote of the commissioners within that body. Is that right? I mean, they discuss, or I guess does the chairman appoint that person? How does it?
Well, going to the appointments, there's really no laid out process other than the one I've explained, like that. That I just explained is established by charter, but in changing the charter, appointing someone to the wonderful counselor, office early, a transition Trace Rowe left office early. I different people committed, duly elected by the people, that existing body that remains those next replacement.
And Lee was scheduled to either run again. She would file in December and then run, and if there was a contested election following spring, I guess. Is that
depending on how many people ran?
Gotcha. So yeah, there could have been, you had to run off and all that whole process too, but resigned because she couldn't hold two elected offices at once. Got 60 days to as we go forward. Is there any other considerations in there that would the commission might think about or consider as their how do you decide? You have to be a resident in Cushing and meet all those qualifications, but is there are there people available to sit in that seat and fill that seat willingly? I mean, nowadays you kind of have to ask that question a little bit because they're complicated, because you've got one candidate who's a challenger who does a lot of personal business development in town, and that may be
Elected body now to make a great choice to fill that position. If they choose to do that, they choose to do it. So, but the purview to do it,
right.
and it's established by the charter, so it rests. How they choose. I was on the council to oppose that, and I don't want to cloud it. May want to do in terms of how they choose.
To get, I mean, there's always very specific things that you have to do to follow and be a part of, and that kind of thing. So, process that always takes a lot slower. Like we just want to right now, and it doesn't work that. Absolutely, it's one thing about you, and you're the one.
Joe, you've been a long time. I think the things from the level in terms of state laws and the charter, it's really designed to keep corruption.
Right.
You know, and just to have government officials who are corrupt, whether they're corrupt at City Hall, personal business, which then back into City Hall and ties off. Look for your town.
Gotcha. Well, again, we appreciate that. I'm going to make one more stab at this because I wasn't very, very clear and concise. Back personally here, I think you had a very good answer to that. But what's the future hold for Terry Brandon, not the city manager, but for Terry Brandon? One, how are you doing with that? And I know, and I can just tell you that our thoughts and prayers are with you every day. If you didn't know what was going on with you and you're just sitting right here, you wouldn't at all. You wouldn't even have an inkling. Tell us how you're doing.
So I think I'm doing well. You know, I was diagnosed terminal cancer on 2 years, and I've taken a lot of treatments since then. I still take treatments. I take treatments every night. Therapy every day. That's my daily routine. But I also take doing exceptionally what could be. You know, I always look at it. The Anderson, you know, I made a point to dress. I had no problems, but there was there who were holding on to life. Mm-hmm. And I mean, holding on to. I go to the oncology, also I see the same people too. Where the oncology center both passed away.
Wow.
So, very blessed. I feel very fortunate to test publicly. And I didn't start believing this when I got sick, but the Lord told me. Yep.
Well, we can all attest to that.
Mm-hmm.
And through very, very tough. I know it's all very complicated and something you have to deal with every day. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say that, you know, you have put that aside. A lot of people would say at your own detriment. You have been committed to Cushing, and is a big deal. You've been doing that for a long time in a lot of different ways. City council. What is personally?
To the people, as it does to myself, that I've had a real service for Cushing, you know, and I think you're right in a lot of ways. Some of my decisions to continue to work and push forward probably haven't been in my best interest sometimes, I know when I was in the middle of chemo, I had to go do chemo one day at the oncology center, and people know how chemo affects people. And I was back here at 6:30 the next morning working. You know, a lot of people didn't know on the weekends, after those treatments on the weekends, there was a 48-hour window where things were pretty good, but on the weekends it was actually hard for me to walk because of the bone treatment that I received that started administering medicine. I had a catheter in my arm that started administering medicine for my bones because I have cancer in my bones. And it was difficult for me to walk during a period on the weekend. So from Saturday to Sunday to half a day on Monday, it was very difficult for me to walk. So I had to have a lot of help to get around. But I didn't allow any of those things to become hindrances to my ability and desire to serve. I haven't asked anybody to feel sorry for me. I haven't tried to use my illness as an excuse not to do my job and do it exceptionally well. And I haven't asked our staff to have pity on me or feel sorry for me and try to cover for me. I feel like I'm still trying to give 110, 120% to this deal every day up until the day I decide I'm not going to do it anymore. Then, like I told you, if I left tomorrow and shut the lights out, I know for a fact that this thing's been left better once I got it. And I feel good about that. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, Joe, the thing that I want to be said is that the Lord says, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord." And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
You're right.
It really does.
You're right. Absolutely. Well, I just want to say, as a citizen of Cushing, watching you all the years that I've been here in town and getting to know you all these years and all the good things that we've and the funny and rough things that we've been through in this room right up here.
Bad predictions.
Well, bad prediction, but they got a pizza. So I don't know, was it that bad? I don't think so. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you personally, regardless of what you've done in your work history, which has been impressive at any level. I can say even from the news conference when you were first police chief on Fox News, when you had to deal with a triple homicide, all the way through the school bond video, all the way through your time as city manager. I have a real appreciation for your approach and your execution of what you believe, and you're guided by, you don't stick your finger in the wind, you're guided by principles, and I think that that's an important thing. So even when you do disagree with things, you can have a discussion about it. You can disagree but not be disagreeable, and I think that has been a big, that in itself is a huge issue for Cushing, because that's what's helped move all of this stuff forward to get it off high center, and the Cushing will benefit from that for years to come. And so just on behalf of citizens here, I think you deserve to be told that you've done a really good, great job here in Cushing, and because you have a heart for it, and because it's not just a job to you, it's something that you believe in, and you've put the effort and the dedication into what goes on here in Cushing. So thank you so very much for doing that. Thank you for coming back here again today.
Oh, no problem.
We'd love to have you back anytime, and we'll continue to push your city manager reports out. I would encourage everybody to read those. Again, if you disagree with them, great. Send an email. I think you'd answer an email and explain anything.
You can email me at citymanager@cityofcushing.org. Really, really easy to remember, citymanager@cityofcushing.org. Just drop me an email. I get some emails where I get cussed out every once in a while, and I'm okay with that. But you know what? Even when I see those people on the street, I still speak to them.
Yeah.
I still will engage with them, because that's how I would want to be treated.
Right.
And I think it sends a clear message to the individual that maybe I ought to reconsider my personal conduct, because I'm not responsive like that to people, and I don't treat people that way, and I don't have a history of treating people that way.
Right.
So.
Well, that again is you've had an open door policy. There's just not many places that can have access to all the information that you willingly give. And so, again, that's why we played that clip of you talking about information is important, and you have done everything you can to execute that, and you continue to do that. And so if there is a question about anything that's going on in Cushing, ask you directly, go straight to, because you'll get probably more information than you probably really want to hear. That's been my experience. I'm like, wow, I can't remember half of that. But it's great. But Terry, I just want to say thank you very much for everything that you do and you continue to do and are doing. And I know that Cushing is a better place for it. And you're exactly right. When you do decide to shut off your light, which I hope is a long time from now, it will be a better place. And you've done a lot of the hard work to get that done. So thank you very much for all the work that you've done and continue to do for us.
I appreciate it.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this portion of the studio show. We're going to have Danny White up here in just a little bit. Kept Terry probably just a little bit longer than he wanted to today, but we got the information in. I hope everybody could hear that well and get to hear all the good information from Terry. So stay with us. Next week, we're going to have Coach Morgan in here. We're going to talk a little bit of CHS football.
You're not inviting me back for that, right?
Probably not. No, it wasn't. I don't know. We'd have to go back to Coach Shoup, I guess, to find out how that prediction.
But Coach Shoup still considers me a friend.
Well, there you go.
He calls me periodically about issues. That's interesting. He calls me about all sorts of different things.
Really?
And asks questions about this, that, and another. And so, but he's not mad at me.
Well, that's good. That's good. Hey, honest assessment, right? You got to have an honest assessment if you know where you're going. So anyway, but we'll have Coach Morgan in here. We'll talk about a great season they had this last year, the Silver Ball. And even though I think it probably was a little bit of fell just a little shorter than he wanted to, of course, but it was still for this community a great season and great run. So we'll have him here next week. We'll talk to him about that. So anyway, thank you guys for watching this portion of the show. We're going to get Danny White in here and get him going. We're going to ask him a few questions about what he's doing maybe next year. Nobody knows there either. We're going to ask that question. We'll see what he says. So anyway, stay tuned. We'll be back here with you in just a little bit. So thanks for watching the Studio Show.
Thank you for watching The Studio Show. People, community, progress.